everybody, this is Kevin and welcome to the next video in my rocket build video series. And as you can see, this is going to be a build of an Estes Generic E2X. Now, before I begin, we're going to do a quick inventory. There are going to be some modifications to this kit. In fact, you probably already see some items laying on the bench here that did not come with the kit. And you can probably kind of guess where I'm going at, what I'm going at with it. But first and foremost, I want to point out the fact that this rocket has no face card, there's no artwork, there's no picture. And the reason for that is because this was one of, I believe they come in 12 in a bulk pack that Estes sells. And I want to give a quick shout out to Joe over at JCHobbies, who sent me this Generic E2X and said, modify it, play with it, build it, do what you want with it. It's yours to do with as you please. So with that, I am taking on the challenge. I'm going to build it, and my goal is to make it look box stock. I want to make it look as if it were built exactly the way the plans called for, paint it and color it the exact same way the artwork shows. But there's no artwork that came with it because, again, it came in a single bag as part of a bulk kit. So obviously catalogs, internet, plenty of places for good color photos. But it's pretty simple in that it's a plain white rocket, so it's hard to mess up the color scheme. And I'll use the pictures that are in the manual as well as online to help locate where the decals are going to go. But what I want to talk to you briefly about is, before we begin the construction, is what modifications I'm going to be making to this build. First and foremost, let's do a quick inventory to show what we have, what we need, and what we have that we don't need. And there is something in here that I'm going to discard. So obviously we've got the fin can, this adapter ring, and the body tube all right there. Launch lug is in a little bag here that came with the parachute. I'll take it out later, I just don't want to lose it. We're not going to use the parachute, and we're not going to use the shock cord that came with it, but more on that later. I've actually got some Kevlar we're going to use in replace of the shock cord. But where it gets different is the top row here. Engine mount tube, obviously we're going to need that. Engine hook, we're going to need that. Where I put it? Right there. The engine block is what's going to go in front of the engine in the tube and give support to the engine hook to help preventing the motor from shooting up the body tube. But where things are going to change is on the black engine hook retainer ring. This ring here is what they ask you to use to, well, once you get the engine hook on the motor tube, they call for using this black ring to slide over and go to a predetermined spot, and it keeps the ring and the hook in place, but it also allows enough movement. And when you install it, it's actually installed from the rear. I'll keep things from rolling off here. It installs from the rear. But let me show you the problem with what I perceive as a problem is when you glue it in, the bottom of the motor tube must be flush with the bottom of the fin can. And then they call for taking this pretty heavy duty adapter ring, slipping it over the motor tube. See if I can do it here without damaging any cardboard. There we go. So it slides up to the fin can, just like that. And that's what locks the fin can in place, or the motor tube in the fin can. But here's where I want to modify things a little bit. As you can see, when you glue it in, there's a little wiggle to it, but you know, that'll all get solid with the glue. But the motor tube is kind of free floating in there. And the only thing on the back side of this junction is that little black retainer ring, which is doing nothing more than holding the hook in place. So what I've decided to do, and it's a slight modification, is I'm going to take a little miter box and a little miter saw, and I'm going to cut 1/8 of an inch off of this green adapter ring. Right about yay, so you know, yay far down, about 1/8 of an inch. And then using that instead of this black retainer ring to hold the engine hook down. So I'm just going to throw this in my extra parts bin. Won't be using it. Once I get this let me put this back on to simulate the effect I'm going for here. And I'm sure you can probably already figure out kind of where I'm going with it. But let's, again, this is the whole thing, but I'm only going to use 1/8 of an inch on the back side. But once I get it on there, that 1/8 of an inch, and I slide it in to glue it, lo and behold, that's going to give much more support to that motor tube on the back side and keep it better centered. So that's the goal with using that, like I said, 1/8 of an inch, just to help hold the motor tube position centered in the back, and we'll still have plenty up front to give it support as it glues into the body tube. So that's the modification that I'm going to be making on the back side. The other big one, and you can probably already see it lingering in the corner here, is an ejection baffle. I've been using these on the last few builds, and I really could not be more pleased with them. They're simple to build, they're pretty convenient, they'll go anywhere you want them to go. In typical builds in the past, I've had to adapt 2 body tubes with the coupler, and I simply replace that coupler with the baffle. Now in this case, we don't have another body tube, so there's no coupling of tubes together. So you have the option of either cutting the tube where you want the baffle to go and then using the baffle as a coupler, or what I think is simpler and cleaner is to just determine how far down you want the baffle to be, take a dowel with some glue, lay it up in the inside, and then simply just run this up to that predetermined length, and then your baffle will be right where you want it without any cut lines or seam lines to worry about. More than likely that's the way we're going to handle it. If I run into any trouble, we may have to cut the tube and then use it as a coupler, but I don't foresee us having to do that. So those are the 2 major modifications: inserting an injection baffle. That way we'll better protect our parachutes from any burns and not have to worry about using any wadding. So I think that's a benefit. And again, just the simple modification to the back side to help give more support to the body tube when we glue it into the fin can. So that's kind of where we're at with the build. Next step is we're going to start assembly, more than likely the motor mount. So hang tight, I'm going to clear off the bench and we're going to get right to work. Okay, as I usually do, the first thing I want to do is get the baffle built. That way it can be set aside and let the glue cure nice and strong before I do anything else with the rocket. So I want to get this stage out of the way. And I'm going to build it just like I have in the past. You've got the 2 bulkheads. One end has a hole for the eyelet to screw into. And then I've got a little piece of 1/16 inch balsa that I'm going to use as a spacer, because once you glue this down into the tube, you want about a 1/16 inch gap there so you can run a fillet and give that a little more string. So first thing we want to do is get our little eyelet, and I want to thread the hole by kind of just getting it run through a few times just to get the threads into the wood. There we go, that's far enough. We're going to back it back out, and actually it looks like I want to go this way because there's a slight conical shape to the wood, and it's really hard to see. It's so minute, but the sides of the disc actually angle inward, so this would slip in this way. Otherwise, I don't know if you can see it ever so slightly, it is angled to go in this direction. So I should have checked that before I started screwing the eyelet in, but simple fix. Just take some wood glue. I'm just going to put a little dab right on the hole. Not much, because we're going to apply possibly a little bit more later as a fillet, but at least this will get some glue in the threads for better adhesion. Okay, now when you screw this in, you don't want to go all the way in to where you're past the threads and into the bare metal. You want to screw it in where there's still just thread in the wood itself. And I'm going to angle this perpendicular to the holes. Okay, and actually that little bit of glue creates a fillet on the top side, but you also want to create just a little bit of a fillet on the bottom side. Okay, and then for this, you can just take your finger, just sort of, wrap it around. There. Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for right there. Okay. I'm going to set this aside while I work on the other end. Okay. Now this piece has the same conical shape, so you got to be kind of conscious of which direction this is going to go in. So this is going to go this direction. Okay, so simply run a very small bead around the rim of one end. Okay, and then you take the piece. Let me make sure I got the right end. Okay, it's going to go this way. Okay, so you kind of get it started. There it goes. Now you got to kind of work quickly so it doesn't stick in position. Lay it on that spacer you've got and just push it down. And then up, and you'll see we got a perfect 1/16 inch inlay there. Kind of wipe any excess glue off. And then what it did by pushing that glue up, it actually creates a fillet on its own. Let me kind of just run my finger around to help clean it up a little bit. There we go. And I'm just going to make a little twisty. I didn't bring any Q-tips out with me, but I just want to clear out those holes of any glue. Because you want to allow as much air to be able to pass through as possible. There we go. Okay, so that piece is now good. We'll let it sit for a little bit. Perfect. And then yeah, then I'll stop the recording and I'll come back and we will glue the other end with the eyelet into this piece. Okay, our next step is building up and inserting the motor tube into the fin can. And the first thing we need to do is measure this for the appropriate cuts and markings for the engine hook to pop into, and then also for the retainer ring, which, if you remember, we're going to modify the retainer ring and do a little different setup, but we'll do that here in a second. But the first thing we need to do is make two marks on here. The first mark we need to do is make a little notch 1 inch from the end. So let me lay my ruler up here and mark 1 inch up, and then also we want 2.5 inches from the same end. So that's going to put us right here, and this is going to be the notch where the engine hook will actually insert into the tube. So now that we've got the two marks done, 1 inch and 2.5, we're going to make a little 1/8 inch slit with our X-Acto. That should be sufficient. And then we take our engine hook and attempt to pop it in. There it goes, just like so. Okay, now because I'm going to extend this line because it's going to be covered up by our engine hook. There we go. Now we'll be able to see it. Now, again, if you remember, we're going to discard the ring that came with it, and we're going to create our own ring with this thicker cardboard tube, but I need to cut it. I'm going to cut about 1/8 inch off. So let me mark that. Okay, there we go. And one thing too, I did a little dry fitting earlier. I think we're going to run into the case where this is going to be a little too thick as it goes further up the tube. So we may need to unwind 1 or 2 layers of cardboard to get this down just a little bit so it'll fit up snugly far enough up in there. So let's go ahead and set this on our miter box. And initially it's going to be a little hard because it's actually taller than the box. So let me just get it started. Kind of drag it through a few times. Once we get far enough down, then I'll be able to get it in the box, in the grooves. In fact, let me just do that outside the box first. If you've ever used a miter box, in theory, they work great, but in reality, they're always a little more cantankerous than you kind of expect them to be. And they don't go as straight as you think they should be. I'm not quite sure why that always seems to work out that way, but in my case it does. Alright, are we far enough in yet? Still not quite. There we go. I think that's far enough in. Yeah. Just gonna draw it through a few times. See, again, in theory, I thought this would just go through like a hot knife through butter, but it's not working out that easily. But we'll get there. Yeah, we're making progress. We're almost through. There we go. And there's our ring. Now see, I had it perfectly straight, and it looks like we're about 1/8 of an inch here, and it looks like it's like less than a 16th there, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. But that's okay. But we still got plenty of meat left on this one to go on the front end, and that'll be good. So let me get this. Okay, so now this is what's going to slide over. The engine hook. And it goes right up to that mark we placed up there. Okay, now let me do a dry fit. Yeah, see, it's already... So what I'm going to go ahead and do is glue it down first, and then it'll stay put, and then if I need to unroll a little bit, I will. So let me slide this. Actually, I'm going to put it on that end. That way I'll see the mark. So a little wood glue just on the front end of the mark we made. And it's okay if it's on this end because it's going to get pushed back anyway. Okay, there's our mark. All right, make sure the hook is parallel to the tube. A little bit up that way. There we go, that looks good. And it's going to kind of wipe this excess out, make a fillet out of it. All right. See, it's already setting up, it's tacky already. Okay. So I'm just going to set that aside just for a second to let that harden up before I attempt to reinsert it. Now, while that's drying, I can go ahead and get my baffle back out because the wood glue is set up well enough that now we can insert the other end into the baffle. All right, so with that, I'm going to take my glue Now in this side, I won't be able to use my spacer. I'm just gonna have to eyeball the 1/16 inch, but that's okay. We'll be close enough to call it good. Sorry, I keep bumping the camera. Okay. Now another thing you need to be aware of is, gotta make sure that the 3 holes on this side are on the opposite side of those 3 holes. So if I'm gonna hold this with the holes on top, I want to insert this one with the holes on the bottom. So that is imperative if you want this to work properly. Whoops. I thought it was well seated. Okay, we want the bottom. Okay. I'm trying to see from overhead if the holes are... I want to rotate it this way just a little bit. Okay. Okay, we're good. Not much of a fill there, so I'm going to let this set up for a few moments later, and then a few minutes, and then I'll put a filter around this end just like I did on that end. So that's it for the baffle, and this will set aside for good, and we'll wait until we're near the end until we actually insert this in the body tube. So we are making progress. Okay, I've done a little bit of work off camera. I took the ring that I glued on the base of the tube there, and I did need to peel a couple layers off. I think it took about 2 full unwinds on that to make a perfect fit. And let me just show you a dry fit here real quick. Right about there, I start feeling resistance. And then just a little bit of effort, pushing forward, and we're in solid tight, and we're flush, and look at that. Perfectly centered. So that ring is absolutely holding the tube centered and more rigid. And then of course the remainder will glue on the front. And again, we're only losing about 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch up on the front, which is really nothing. But before we do too much, let me pop that back out. I want to glue in the little motor thrust ring on the front end, and this is just going to glue in with some wood glue up till it hits the tab there on the engine hook. So that's literally as far forward as it can go. So pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to run a small bead of glue, and it doesn't take much, and you really don't want much, because if you put too much in, then it's just going to run down the tube and cause interference on the motor itself. So just a very thin bead, and the engine hook itself is doing the majority of the load anyway. So let me wipe off the excess. In fact, I think that's a little much, so I'm just going to go ahead and wipe most of that out down. In fact, I'm going to take another little layer out. There. Because you really don't want this pushing any glue down the tube where it's going to interfere with the motor. Okay, just slip that in. Again, it'll hit the stop there at the tab. And let me just take a little dowel, and I'm just going to clean up any residual that did flow through. But for the most part, it looks like the only part that ran through was near the hook itself. So all in all, it's pretty good. There we go. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. So now with that in, we're ready to glue this into the fin can. Now, also off camera, I took a bottle of thin CA glue, and I ran just a fine line along the edge of this just to hold the cardboard in place, because as this is being pushed in the can, those layers can actually unwind and kind of peel themselves off, so that CA glue is actually holding it more rigid, which is going to help us keep the uniformity of the cardboard. But in this case, I'm going to glue it on with some plastic cement, because plastic cement will bond to cardboard, but it'll also bond to plastic. Wood glue on plastic, not very effective. So I'm going to use something that works for both materials. Okay, I'll stick that in there, and kind of hard to see. I'm going to actually look from the other end here. Not sure if you can see that bead that I'm laying in there. There we go. And the cement will actually kind of melt the plastic a little bit, which will help create that strength and bond between the two. Okay, then we just simply take this part, there through that, and quickly push it till we're flush. There we go. In fact, it went in pretty smooth because it had melted the plastic a little bit. So that kind of proves that it worked. So there you have the centered motor tube. Let's see if I can... Some of the cement got on this part, which I really don't want, because I need to allow the wood glue to set up on that when I glue in this adapter ring here. So let me let this set up for a little while, because I don't want this to pop out when I slide this on. So I'm going to set this aside, but that looks good, everything looks flush, and we'll come right back to it. Okay, so this has been setting up now, and it's solid, one piece. So now we're ready to go ahead and glue the green adapter ring onto the motor tube, and it's going to butt up against the front end of the fin can here. Now I'm expecting to get some runoff, which is fine. I can easily wipe that up with a paper towel, but I want to make sure I get this pretty well covered, because this is definitely some strength involved in this part here. So I'm just going to smear this around, and I'm going to spread it with my finger too. Go ahead and get the engine hook and everything. So yeah, this part can be a little messy, but that's fine. Just get, sorry I was off camera there, but get some good full coverage. And then whatever buildup is pushed to the back will actually create a fillet, which will help with strength. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and slide this onto the tube, twisting as I go, and you can see it building up that fillet all the way to the back end. There we go. Now I'm gonna wipe that fillet off. But there is no doubt that I have got 100% complete full coverage inside of that adapter ring. Alright, there we go. Everything looks good, everything looks straight, solid. Now I'm going to go ahead and utilize this opportunity to build up just a little bit of a fillet on the front. Now normally there wouldn't be a fillet because this green tube would extend all the way to the end of the motor tube, but because we cut some off, gives me a little bit of opportunity to make a fillet here, which I think is a benefit. So I think it's a win-win all the way around. Okay, you just got to make sure you don't get any on the outer end of the green adapter, because that's going to interfere with it being able to glue into the body tube. But there we go. Nice clean job. Got a nice fillet. Everything's straight, everything's secure. I really couldn't ask for anything better. Okay, I'm going to set this aside for overnight drying, and then we will begin the inserting of the baffle, which has now dried. And I did build up a fillet too. It's kind of hard to see because it's already dried clear. One other thing I want to do is, before we glue it in, I'm going to take some clear epoxy and just paint the exposed wood here with epoxy. That'll help kind of fireproof it from the blast, because eventually I guess over time enough charges can kind of char that plywood, and I just want to give it a nice coat of epoxy to help protect the wood fibers from burning out over time. But yeah, that looks good. Everything's good. The holes are... Now I will tell you this off camera, after I glued it in, the holes were ever so slightly off from the other side, so I took a pair of needle nose pliers, one on each side, and I was able to rotate that disc with needle nose pliers. Just by grabbing the hook and twisting, it's not going to do anything, because that would actually screw the hook in and out. So I had to take pliers to actually rotate the disc until it was completely opposite of that side right there. So again, I'm going to let this sit overnight to fully cure, and then we will prepare that to glue into here. And one thing I'm going to do also, they recommend you gluing this on as the next step. But the problem with that is if you want to paint this, which I do, then you're going to have to mask off and worry about the fins. It just might be more of a hassle. So I'm going to paint this and prepare this and then glue this on after the fact. Now, if I change my mind, I'll obviously let you know and film it. But as of now, I don't think I'm going to paint the plastic fin. I think I'm just going to leave it as is and just worry about painting the tube. But I may elect to paint it all as one anyway, so we'll see. I've got overnight to think about it. Okay, I'm going to take a step away from building for a second, and I want to do a little rocket science with you guys. And yes, that involves mathematics. So here's kind of what my goal is in this little project. It's a side project. So as you know, we're installing the baffle in the body tube. Now the question is, where am I going to put the baffle? How far up, how far down? Well, I don't have a face card that came with this rocket, but I do have a picture of it, and you can get pictures off the internet. You can get pictures of any rocket at any scale, and I'm going to use this picture and determine where I'm going to put the baffle. Now what I've decided to do is, if you look at right here on the side of the picture here, there's a decal about a third of the way up the rocket. I determined that's probably going to be an ideal location for the baffle, because that will give me room up top to store the parachute and anything else I may want to put inside. But I want to leave a little bit of space between the motor and the baffle as well. You don't want it butted up right against the ejection charge. So I've determined I'm going to mount the baffle right where this decal is going to be located. And a follow-up to this is, where does the decal go? Well, I want to mimic the face card, so we're going to do some calculations here so I can put that decal exactly on my rocket, exactly where it is on the picture displayed here. And again, the baffle will be right on the inside of where that decal is. So I've got a little calculation here I want to show you guys, and this is a scale ratio formula that I actually stole from Don from Retro Rockets, and I'm going to put a link to his video because he does a much better explanation of this than I'm about to show you. But I took his formula and the way he presented it, and I kind of put it in my own words here, my own little format. And again, I'm not going to explain it as in depth as he did, but I encourage you to go watch it, and again, I'll put the link in the description for that video. But thank you, Don, for showing this in your video and allowing us to learn and gain knowledge from it and apply it. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I need two items. I need one, the actual body tube, and I need a picture of the body tube. And what I need to do is measure those two measurements that are the same thing but in different scale. So the actual body tube that came with the kit, I'm going to measure out, is exactly 9.5 inches. So our actual tube is 9.5. Okay, the picture that we're using for scale purposes here in the manual, I'm going to measure from the base of the tube there, right at the top of the fin can, just to the point where the nose cone is, and that's exactly 3 inches. So that's a nice even number. So we have the picture length is 3, the actual is 9.5. Now we need to create what's called the multiplier. We need to determine what this magic number is so that anything I measure in the picture, if I multiply it by that multiplier, that will indicate where on the actual item that item needs to be. So, for example, the base of this decal, which will be the base of the baffle, I need to measure up and determine how far up it is. So on the picture, the bottom of that decal is right at just about 15/16 of an inch. Okay, so take a calculator. 15 divided by 16 is 0.9375. So our new number here is 0.9375. Now, what we don't know yet is our actual number, okay? But using the formula, the picture times x equals the actual length. That's basically the same as saying the actual divided by the picture equals our multiplier. So, what's the picture? The picture is 0.9375, okay? We need to multiply that by x, which is our multiplier. Well, we don't know x yet. So let's do the formula. In fact, I should have just written, let's not do that one yet. Let's do the 3. If our picture is 3 inches and our actual is 9.5, we need to take our two sides here of the equation and divide each of these. I shouldn't have written that 9375 yet. Divided by the picture. So we're going to divide 3 by 3, and then the 9.5 divided by 3, and that'll give us our x. So 9.5 divided by 3 equals 3.166. I'm just going to put 3.16. So x in this case is 3.16. That is our multiplier. Okay, so now this is our standard for all measurements. The base of that decal on the picture, in the picture, is 15/16, which is 0.9375. Okay, now we need to determine where that is on here. So we need to simply multiply that number by our multiplier. So our picture is 0.9375 times our multiplier of 3.16. And we get 2.9625, just shy of 3 inches. I'm going to actually, let's just say, you know, that's almost the same as 15/16. So I'm going to say 2 15/16 is what we need. So now I take my ruler and I measure up 2 15/16. Make a little mark, and that is exactly where we need to put the base of that decal to mimic what the picture shows. So thank you, Don, for sharing that little bit of knowledge with us, and I'm actually able to apply it. And also, when I insert the baffle, I will measure a measuring stick that I'll push it in to exactly 2 15/16. So again, just shy of 3 inches, and that'll get it right to where we need it to be. All right, moving on to the next step. Okay, the next step we're going to take here is we're going to prepare the body tube for primer and paint. And before I do, I want to go ahead and make the holes for the altimeter vent holes. Now, in times past, I've always marked the locations for the holes, and then I've taken a hand drill or a regular drill and just drilled a 1/16 inch hole around the perimeter of the tube to act as the vent holes. The only problem with drilling, though, is when you drill in, all it really does is push the cardboard out on the inside, and it kind of blossoms out, and then over time it'll start to kind of close back up, so you don't get a full hole from what size you drill. And then you have to go in there with try to sand off the residue, you know, the residual fibers, and then it just makes a mess. So with that being said, I received some advice from Joe from JCHobbies, and he said to get one of these 2-inch long or 2-inch reach hole punches. Now, They sell these in different sizes. They have 1/16 inch holes, they've got 1/8 inch holes. I went with the 1/16, and being a 2-inch reach, this will easily go down your tube to at least a 2-inch mark if you wanted to punch it at that distance. We're not going to need the full 2-inch, but I think we're going to probably be maybe 1.5. So to determine how deep you need to drill your holes, take your nose cone and measure how deep your nose cone is from the shoulder. Here's your shoulder right there. So it looks like our nose cone is 1 1/8 inch deep. I want to allow for some leeway, so I'm going to measure down a 1.5 inch. So we're going to go 3/8 of an inch beyond the end of the nose cone. So take your body tube, and like I said, in this case I'm going to do 1.5 inches. So just, I'm going to put 2 inches there, and I'll mark it the 1/2 inch or 1.5 inch position. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and make that one of my hole punch locations. Now, what I do to make some decent looking hole in the lines for the holes is take an old fin alignment guide that comes with some Estes kits, and this happens to be a BT50, and this is a 3-fin guide. So I'm going to get 3 holes. So I'm going to line one of the fin locations on that mark that I made, and then I'm just going to rotate it and go to the next fin, draw a little mark there where that hole is going to be, and our final one right there. Okay, so now I've got the locations for 3 evenly spaced and equally depth holes. So I can go ahead and remove the guide, and then I'm going to take my hole punch here, and I've never used this before on a rocket, so this will be a first for me. Go ahead and slide the hole punch into the tube and align the hole. Let's see if I can show you right on the notch mark there. I'm going to go and slowly close it to get close to it. Try to make it as exact as I can right there, and then just pop it. There we go. Look at that, nice clean hole. Nothing to sand off on the inside. Feels smooth on the inside. Excellent. Okay. So success. Thank you, Joe, for this tip. I'm very pleased with it. Okay, we'll do a second hole here. Line it up on that notch. Perfect. And number 3. Perfect. Look at that. 3 perfectly spaced holes. Yeah, I'm sold on that. No more drilling for me. Now this is a 1/16 inch. They also have, like I said, a 1/8 inch. I may get that in time for some of my larger rockets. But for something this small, that's perfect. I mean, look how perfect that hole is. It's not, I don't know if it's focusing or not. There we go. Look at that. Clean. Just perfect. And on the inside, no fibers or anything sticking out. So, way to go, Joe. Thank you. Alright, so now this is ready for paint prep. Okay, the next step I want to take here is, after we've got the holes punched in for the altimeter vent holes, we need to mount our launch lug, because I want to do this before I primer and paint the rocket body. Now, one point of contention I'm just going to bring up here. So this launch lug is, let me look on the ruler here, it's about 2 3/8 inch long. That's on a 9.5 inch rocket body. I mean, we're talking almost 1/3 of the rocket body is launch lug. So I'm looking at the manual, and if you can see here, they show mounting the launch lug 1 inch up from the bottom, and they show it gluing on. And the launch lug in that picture is almost the same length as that 1 inch gap between the fin can and the base of the launch lug. So that tells me that more appropriately it should be a 1 inch launch lug. So that got me to wonder, why do they give you a 2 3/8 inch launch lug? So I'm like, well, that's easy enough, you just cut it down. So I did my due diligence and I did my homework, and I looked everywhere I could find on YouTube. I googled it, rocket forums, to see if anyone cut this down or actually glued on the full 2 3/8 inch launch lug. And from what I've seen, everybody, 100% of what I've seen, is they're gluing the full length on. So that being said, I guess I hate to be different and try to cut it down and risk losing stability off the pad. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the full 2 3/8 inch. I just personally think it's overkill, but since everyone else is using it and they're having success with it, I figure, well, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that just does not look like the 1 inch picture they show in the diagram. I mean, look at this thing. Outrageous. So I would question Estes as to why they show such a small lug in the picture. They should at least enlarge the picture size or tell you to cut this down. But we're going to go with it as is. Anyway, that's my soapbox. I'll get down off it. But we do need to mark a center line down the tube to give us a good reference for gluing that on. So I'm just going to take my Estes tube alignment guide here, and I'm going to set the launch lug, just for cosmetics sake, between 2 of the altimeter vent holes. So I've already gone ahead and marked a very light mark between the 2 holes. So I'm going to use that as my reference point. And I'm just going to draw a line. A relatively light line, but enough where I can see it. And I'm going to scuff that up a little bit with some sandpaper before we actually glue it down, but that should be plenty good enough. Now they also recommend, well, they tell you 1 inch up from the base. So let me go ahead and make a mark on this line 1 inch up. Which puts it right there. So that'll be the base of the launch lug at that point. And then let me mark the upper point so I'll know where to sand. So I'm going to sand between these 2 points. Okay, so let me go get some sandpaper and we will return. Okay, I can't tell you how long it's been since that last segment when I said I was going to go get some sandpaper. I did, but in that time I took a long time to contemplate what I was about to do. And as you can see, I've made a decision. I'm guessing everyone uses the full length launch lug because everyone else uses the full length launch lug. So I'm going to be different. I went and looked at all my other rocket kits and I cannot see any justification for why that thing needed to be as long as it was. So I took it and I cut it down to exactly 1 inch in length. Now, one thing I did decide to do, instead of mounting it at the 1 inch mark for the base of it where the instructions show, I decided to move it up to the upper portion. In fact, I decided to use the 2 5/16 inch mark, which, if you remember from earlier, was the point at which the bottom decal is going to begin. So I made that the upper point of the launch lug, extending down 1 inch. So here are my 2 marks. I don't know if you can see it in the light, or maybe the glare, but anyway, that's my executive decision on that front. I did extend the line all the way down the length of the tube, just so I have a reference line when I do my alignment. So I'm still going to take a little sandpaper here and just rough up the area between the 2 marks. That's enough, just to take off the gloss and nothing more. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take some wood glue, take my launch lug, and run a small bead. Now I'm going to use fillets on this as well, so it's not imperative that I get full strength on this bond here. Just enough to hold it in place until I get to where I put the fillets on. So take our tube, set it on our center line, and an overhead view, get it straight. Okay, I'm going to look down the length of it. Looks good to me. That's exactly what we want. So I'm going to let this sit off to the side for a little while till it hardens, and then I will do my fillets. Once the fillets are done, then she'll be ready for primer and paint. Okay, while the launch lug is drying, I also want to take this opportunity to show you the nose cone. I went ahead and cut out the little plastic insert that's in the eyelet there, open that up, but that's not the big news. The big news is, look at that monstrous hole I created. I went ahead and bored out the whole base here, which will enable me to insert the altimeter into the nose cone, as you see me do in all my other previous videos. I swear by that idea. I think it's a wonderful use of space. Now, if you ever need to put any nose weight or anything in it, it makes it a lot easier to get the weight in the nose as well. So again, just opening it up gives you so many more options. Now, I've already rough sanded this a little bit. There were some seam lines down either side of the cone. I sanded those down flush best I could. So really all I need to do is primer this, get an idea if I need to fill in any dents or dings. I think I may see some areas that might need it, but those will be more evident once I get the primer on. So I'm going to take this off camera and do some primer and painting on it. Okay, well, I've got the launch lug still drying, and it's dry, but it's not cured yet, so I still want to let that sit for a little while longer to harden up before I do the fillets. But while that is drying, I want to go ahead and prepare the baffle for inserting into the tube. So as you can see, I've got some JB Weld epoxied on the back end to help kind of resist the heat from the exhaust ejection charge, I should say. But I want to go ahead and attach my Kevlar shock cord to the eyelet there and have it ready to go, because once you get this in the rocket tube, there's no way of attaching it, so you got to get that on first. So I do have a roll of 100-pound Kevlar, and I'm going to measure the length later on as to how far to make it, but initially we can go ahead and get started with our knots. Now, I'm going to do two separate sets of heat shrink, and because I don't know yet the length of the cord, I need to slip these on first. So we'll get these on and out of the way. Sorry, bumped the camera there. Okay, we'll get, and I'm going to slide those clear out of the way. But there's two sets of heat shrinking. I'll show you why here in a second. So first of all, we just go ahead and need to tie a knot. Now, some people say a slip knot. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on knots by any means, but I do want to at least double the knot up. There we go. And then on top of this, I'm going to double it with opposite directions. I think it's called half hitch, double half hitch, something like that. Okay, so there's a significantly strong double knot. Now I'm going to wrap the knot with the heat shrink, but before I do want to put a dab of glue on it just to help hold the knots together from any slippage. So let me just go ahead and just a small dab, I mean just ever so slight. See, and that's probably even more than I need. But then I'm just going to kind of work that around the knots with my fingers, press it in, make it kind of all gel as one. There we go. Now I'm going to take some scissors and just snip off a little bit of this excess here. Okay. Then you want to take your heat shrink, and I'm going to use the smaller one first just to cover the knot and the excess piece. So work this up and over the knot like so. And then you're going to take a heat gun and just cinch that down over the knot. Like that. Now that'll keep our knots from ever coming undone. And then you want to cover up the whole thing with some wider heat shrink that will cover not only the knots but the actual eyelet itself too. So I'm just going to kind of drape that over the top just like so. So there is no way that that's ever gonna come off now. That is one secure piece. And it's also heat resistant, at least at that juncture, which will get, you know, further from the hot air as it travels further up. So there we go. Now I will go ahead and use the tube because I need to cut and create the loop. Now what I've decided to do in this case is, instead of cutting the instant, like for example mounting it here and then making the loop just shy of the top of the body, I'm going to go ahead and run the Kevlar cord outside the body and make the loop up here. But then I'm going to cover the cord where it exits with some heat shrink to help try to prevent any zippering. But I'm afraid if I make the loop inside the tube, in this instance I won't be able to back the cord out and tie the elastic on the back side, and there's no way I'm going to be able to get on the inside very well, so I'm going to go ahead and extend the loop out. I really don't like doing it that way, but in this case I really don't see much of an option. So let's see, I'm measuring this right at the top of where the launch lug's at. Let's put our loop, say, right here. So I'm just going to kind of tie a loop into the string. I shouldn't say string, it's Kevlar cord. And then there's our loop. Okay, make sure that's kind of where we want it. Good enough. Okay, then I can snip this off and make sure that's nice and taut. Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll save this for our next project. And just like before, we want to dab a little bit of glue on that knot and just kind of work it into the threads. Just like that. Okay, so there we go. That's all done. I'm going to set this aside for the glue to dry, and then again at some point we're going to actually glue this up into the rocket body. And but before we do, I will end up measuring and getting the heat shrink put on the cord right at the point of exit to kind of soften this up so it won't cut into it and cause any zippering. So, all right, we're making progress. Okay, the launch lug is completely cured now. It's hardened, and we're going to do our fillets. But before I do, I want to show you what I finished up with the baffle. I went ahead and measured out and extended the Kevlar cord until I designated the end point where it reaches the end of the body tube there, and I tied a knot in the Kevlar for two reasons. One, to make it a little bit thicker right at that point, and also to give the heat shrink something to hold on to, so after I tighten it, it won't slide up and down the cord. So that little knot, I'm not sure it'll focus, but that little knot is what is going to hold the heat shrink in place. And it's flexible, it's, you know, it's kind of rubbery, so it'll act as a good insulator to hopefully prevent any zippering. So the baffle is complete. Next thing we'll do is glue that in the tube after the tube is done and ready. But now it's time to put on our fillets. Now the fillets are super simple. Really, it's as easy as just running a bead of glue down that crease and then just wiping it right off. It's that simple. So let me grab a piece of paper towel and we will be ready to go. Okay. And you're gonna get messy. There's no way of avoiding it. Your fingers are gonna get gluey. That's why you should always have paper towel on hand. Okay. Push it out and then kind of pull it back in. Okay, looks like I need a little bit more in there. Okay, getting a little gloppy, but that's okay because I'm going to wipe it off anyway. just like that. Just a nice, smooth, steady pull. And just kind of wipe away any excess over the edges. Like so. Okay. And we'll do the other side. It's really that simple. The hardest part about it is waiting for it to dry. And I've said that on many projects. Patience is the key to model rocket building. Any models in particular, but it's definitely a virtue when it comes to building. Okay. Push it out a little bit and then pull it in. Just like that. Voila. So there we have it. 2 completed fillets. Now these we're gonna have to let sit overnight as well, because I want it to be hardened before I put any paint over it. I don't want to paint over a still drying wet glue. So that's that. We'll get back to that once it's dry. Okay, I'm gonna do this next step pretty quickly because I've already got my 5-minute epoxy mixed up, but just before I insert the glue into the body, I want to show you the completed body. The painting was done. I got 2 coats of gloss white Krylon, followed by the decals, followed by 2 coats of the Pledge Future floor gloss, and all is well, nice and shiny and glossy. And so now we're going to glue the baffle into the rocket. Now I'm going to insert the glue from the back side, but I'm actually going to insert the baffle from the front. That way there's no chance of me getting the shock cord into the epoxy. And you'll have to trust me on this. I've got it pre-measured and marked on the dowel, but whatever stick you're using, just make sure you mark everything accordingly. Alright, so I'm just going to run that in the glue, take it to my mark, and I'm actually going to put the glue on the forward end because I'm going to slide it from the forward to the rear, so it'll pick up the glue as it makes its way down the tube. I think one more batch of it will suffice. Okay. Okay, I'm going to insert the baffle in the tube. Now let me clean this off so I can use it as my marker. Okay, and you can see my shock cord is right at the exit, right where the knot is in the heat shrink. So that is perfect. Actually, by pushing it forward and backward, we got a little fillet build up on both ends. I'm not sure if you can see down there with the light. Let's see if I can angle it. There's just not enough light. There's a little bit there for you. Okay. So we got that in. That's actually a huge step. Very, very cool. I'll let that sit for a few minutes, and then I'm going to mix up some more epoxy, and we're going to glue the fin can on. Now, I've already got the decals on the fin can. Now, I elected not to put any clear or paint or gloss or anything on the fins. I just put the decals straight onto the plastic, because if any part of this rocket's going to get dinged up a lot, it's going to be the tail fins. So I figure why paint them if they're close enough color match, which they are. I mean, the nice thing about it, that decal right there acts as a good separator for the two whites. So I feel comfortable just gluing this on without any paint or clear over the fins. So again, we're going to let that sit for a few minutes. I'm going to mix up another batch of epoxy, glue the fin can on, and this rocket is just about done. Okay, little change of plans here. The epoxy is pretty much set in the side for the baffle, but what I've decided to do is not use epoxy on the fin can. I could, but cardboard to cardboard wood glue would work just fine, so I'm going to use wood glue on that, and I'm going to put a small bead of plastic cement just along the very outer edge there to grip the plastic that's on the fin can. And one other thing I did do was I took some sandpaper and roughened up the plastic right where the glue is going to be on. So I'm just going to apply some wood glue further up the tube and then some plastic cement right on the inside lip there. And then with that, we're going to go ahead and glue it in. Now the manual shows for aligning the launch lug with the engine hook. So it's going to go in like that. And looking down at it, I guess the hook's not going to interfere with the launch rod. That would have been my fear. But I guess, you know, as long as this isn't sticking out, we're fine. But that's what they call for. And if need be, I guess I can always tweak that bend a little bit with some pliers to keep it from sticking too far out. But I think we're good. So, with that, I'm going to take my wood glue. I'm going to run a decent amount because we've got quite a bit of surface area to cover. There. And then I'm just going to take a toothpick, or I'm sorry, a popsicle stick, and kind of run that around a little bit. Okay. Then I'm going to take my plastic cement and run a bead of it. You know what, that's probably gonna, I'm gonna have to wait. I'm gonna actually put the cement on the plastic because otherwise the cardboard's gonna pick it up. And I'll probably have to clean the excess off, because when you put it on this way, it tends to kind of push out a little bit. Okay, I got paper towels on the standby. So let me get my engine hook and launch lug sided up together. Okay, I'm going to slide this on and kind of use a twisting motion as I go. In fact, I'll do a full 360 here. Okay, got those lined up. Take a paper towel. A little rubbing alcohol. Okay, I am making a royal mess of this. That was not my intention. I'm just gonna leave it to sit like that. Apparently I got some cement on my fingers somehow. So I'm just gonna let that sit as is. Take a roll of masking tape. Okay, that didn't work out as planned, but how often do they? Okay. Let me clean off my fingers with some alcohol here. Always have some rubbing alcohol on standby to do any sort of cleanups. Okay. That way you can touch things and not worry too much. Okay. I did blotch it up just a little bit where the glue kind of oozed out on the sides, and I was afraid of it oozing out And I tried to limit how much I put on, but I still put on a little bit too much. But oh well, this is going to be a flyer, not a shelf queen, as they say. So that part is done. I mean, it's strong, don't get me wrong, it ain't coming off now, so that's, I guess, the silver lining on that cloud. So there's that. Just for aesthetics, I'm going to go ahead and push this in and insert the nose cone. And show you guys what this rocket looks like. Done. There it is. It's officially done. Next time you'll see this will be on the launch pad on my next launch days video. So thanks for following along. If you have any suggestions, comments, tips, or anything you think I could have done better or worse, just leave a comment down below. I appreciate it. I will answer your feedback. And please leave a like and hit that little notification bell if you're subscribed, so you'll get notified of my next videos. And again, thanks for following along, and look forward to seeing you at the launch pad.